All right, this is the study hall for November 20th, and we're going to be doing more critical reasoning. Theme from before, we've had a couple of sessions on this theme already, but the idea is that you can personalize a lot of passages on this test. Specifically, when you have a passage that is related to the actions of people or businesses, because businesses are ultimately people too. So basically, whenever the passage is about what people are going to do, there's going to be some perspective that's going to be the most important perspective here. When I say most important, I mean really just the fulcrum on which the whole thing turns. Like there's going to be some entity whose behavior is really going to be most directly related to whether something will happen or not. And it's up to you to figure out what that is. Basically, you know, just think about it. Just think about whose actions are most deterministic. So, for instance, if you, just as an example, if the passage was about whether a certain product will sell on the market, if you think about whether the product sells or does not sell, ultimately, at the end of the day, that would come down to the buyer. Does the buyer buy that product or not? So you would adopt the perspective of the buyer in that kind of situation. So try to think very carefully about that. And what you might want to do with a lot of critical reasoning problems, you can't really just read the text one time. Because with a lot of these, you got to read through it to figure out what perspective to take, and then you got to read it again from that perspective. So here's something that you might want to try. As with everything else, you should just kind of throw it at the wall and see if it sticks. Meaning, like, try it, see if it works for you. If it doesn't work for you, don't do it. But if it does work, do it. So you might want to try quickly browsing the passage first and noticing what the issue is. Because all of these passages will have some sort of issue that you're trying to resolve. So then, once you know what the issue is, think about points of view, right? So again, as an example of what I'm talking about here, if the issue is, will this product sell on the market or will it not? Ultimately, the decision there belongs to the buyer of the product, or at least the potential consumer. Yeah, because the marketer can't directly determine whether or not something will sell. Ultimately, the consumer has that power. So figure out whose actions are most central to this whole thing, or whose point of view, and then go from there. And then go back and read slowly. Slowly is the key here. You should really be always doing this stuff relatively slowly. Like, one of the biggest problems that people have here is thinking that they have to rush. If you want to prove to yourself, by the way, that you don't have to rush, you can just count the words in these passages and just think about reading speeds. Like, most critical reasoning passages are somewhere between 60 and 120 words, which means that even if you read at an unbelievably slow pace of 60 words per minute, that means even if you read this slowly, like 1 word per second, you would still get through that passage in between 1 and 2 minutes. So you don't have to rush this at all. And if you do rush it, the net result will be that you'll get through it more slowly. That's kind of how this works, right? So, because if you go through it too fast, you'll miss things, and then you'll have to backtrack. And if you backtrack enough times, even if you backtrack just once or twice, you're taking longer than you would if you went more slowly to begin with. So don't rush it. Rushing is a big thing. It's bad. All right, copyright notice. Same as always, these problems are from the free GMATprep software, and they belong to GMAT. So these are from the free software. We're allowed to reproduce those because the software is free, as long as it carries this copyright notice. So here's the copyright notice. And don't forget, when you get multiple choice questions, don't forget where you find those. You find those underneath your name. Letter A. Do it. Let's do a problem. There you go. Someone already did choice A. Okay, go ahead and try this one. Remember where to find your multiple choice answers right there. Give it a shot, please. Okay, this is the point where we're getting into a lot of time being spent, so it's time to pick something. If you are still definitely headed toward a definite goal, then you can take a little bit more time, but after this long, that seems less likely. So, yeah, I mean, I can't really force your hand, but if you don't have an answer yet, you should pick something. Okay. What is ultimately the issue here? So what you want to do, remember which part of these things you should read first. You should always read the question part of the question first, because that's what gives you a goal. That's how you actually know what you're even supposed to do here. So this means ultimately at the end of the day you have to weaken something, but before you can do that, you have to understand what this is. So what is that? And more generally, what is the issue in this problem? Does anybody have a can anybody give me a capsule summary of what is the issue? Like, what are we even arguing about here in the first place? Chat box, if you know. What is the issue? Yeah, the issue is whether the wine bottles are going to be mistaken for one another by whom. By the consumer. So one thing that should be quite clear here. Yeah, substitution of brands, I think you have the right idea, although the word substitution kind of makes me think that someone, like a retailer, would be swapping out one for the other. But if you mean the consumer, then yes. Right, so the issue that we are facing here is, will the consumer be confused by the two brands? You know, will the consumer actually buy a Danville bottle when they want to buy a Mordet bottle? So basically, will the consumer be confused? So, well, I think we know who we want to read this as then, right? So we want to read this as a consumer. Can anybody be more specific than that? Like, we should read this from the point of view of a consumer who wants to do what? Yeah, what we want to do is we want to read as a consumer who's actually trying to buy the wine from Mordet. Because that's ultimately what the argument is about. Like, this is kind of like, sounds like the prelude to some sort of copyright or trademark infringement, trade dress infringement kind of thing, right? Like, they're almost accusing the Danville wine without really saying it of copying their trade dress, or whatever you call it. So make yourself, so read the passage as a consumer who wants to buy more day wine. Okay, so that's us. I mean, we want to buy a bottle from these guys. And then you got to make sure you know which side of this issue that you're on. Might take a second of thought here. I mean, this one helps because it's clear which side each winery is on. I mean, these guys are the ones who are accusing confusion. These guys are defending it. They're like, nope, not confusion. You can tell it apart, right? I mean, you know who's on which side, right? So undermining their response, it means you're back on the side of more day. So you're going to be on more day's side of this issue. Because if you're going against Danville's side of the issue, then you must have been on their side of the issue. So that's the goal. Remember, the more specific your goal is, the more specific a standard that you have for the choices, the better. I mean, in general, your legwork should mostly be done by the time you get to the choices. So you need to be on their side of this issue, which means you are at risk of buying the wrong wine. So that's the standard that we're going to hold these choices up to. So the choices, which one of these things? Make it a question. Does this make it likely that I'll go home with a bottle of Danville wine by accident? I mean, this is the kind of thing that you want, and really you should not let yourself go to the answer choices until you have something like this. Until you have something that is this specific. In particular, your standard should not ever contain words like argument, or undermine, or conclusion. Those are the kind of things that create problems. You know, I mean, just think about that, because the thing is, like, think about that in real life. Think about superimposing weird terms like that. You know, if you were arguing about something, anything at all, right? Like, should I park my car in this lot, which is farther away because it costs less? Or should I park it in another lot, which is closer but costs more? I mean, if someone responded to you with something like, well, a conclusion, argument, blah, 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 you would be like, dude, you don't know what you're talking about. So just make sure that you don't fall into that trap, right? When you see words like undermine and response and conclusion and argument, you got to get all these things out of there and replace them with specifics. Specifics is the goal. Replace all vague words with specifics. So by the time you get here to the choices, you should be mostly done. This is where the time is spent. The time is spent getting from there to there. The choices should be pretty quick, especially if you're the consumer, right? Okay. Choice A says that gold is not just that one bottle, but that it's actually kind of a trademark of the Danville stuff. So what does that mean? Well, this means that the gold is actually a feature associated with Danville wines. So, and the gold labels are not on Morday wines. So if I'm the consumer, if I see that, this means I should be able to tell them apart. This makes it more likely. Because if it's, you know, if the gold is some sort of familiar pattern on the Danville bottles, then I'm going to know, sure, gold label, okay, that's Danville, that's the one I don't want to buy. I want to buy the one that's not gold. If there's that degree of consistency, if that is a thing, that's going to, if anything, it's going to make the Danville wines more recognizable. So that's the wrong way to answer. I mean, it is relevant for sure. But relevance not good enough. You actually have to be on the right side of the issue. So this one's the wrong way. Same thing with choice B. I mean, if this bottle is taller than that bottle, like if there's any difference that is a difference, it's going to make this less likely, right? Anything that makes it more distinct. So also this means more likely I'll be able to tell them apart. So just like choice A, that's also the wrong way answer. We have a few people picking each of these choices, right? Notice these choices are white when you want black. They're exactly the opposite of what you want. Like these would both support the notion that the bottles can be readily distinguished. It's kind of weird. I mean, you might think it's strange that you would actually pick the exact opposite of what you want. But most likely that just means you didn't have a clear enough standard for the choices. If you get to the point where it's all specifics, which choice makes it likely that I will confuse them, you're not going to pick things like these. Nobody picked C. We don't really care about ads, and this doesn't really address the issue one way or the other. It doesn't address the confusion issue. Okay, well, D, so think about what this means if you are the consumer in this situation. What is that? Most obvious feature. I mean, given what they've described here, what is the most obvious feature? Yeah, it's the actual bottle because that's what they have described as distinctive. And since nothing else has been described in such a way, you want to infer that that's the most distinctive. Like they wouldn't describe this as distinctive and not that unless this is the most distinctive feature. Like they're not going to mislead you with words. So the most obvious feature of the bottle is the fact that it is tall and black. So if they buy it, you know, if I'm just going to be like, you know what, I'm in a hurry, I'm just going to pick up the tall black bottle and suppose that it's more day, it means I'm more likely to confuse them. So if that's all I use, then I'm likely to confuse them. How about that? So that's a choice that we want. And then many popular wines, many wines doesn't really help us with these two. You know, because these two are also sold in bottles of a standard design, but you know, this doesn't really help us. It doesn't illuminate the problem here. Any questions about this problem? Notice the challenge, like 95% of the challenge is really getting from this to that. Okay. Now for one that lots of people love. Let's see, where is that one? Here you go. And don't forget we're a multiple choice answer found. Here. Let's go for it. Okay, we're getting to be into a large-ish amount of time. Again, if you have a standard that is specific and you are still applying it, then keep going. But if not, it's time to pick a guess. While you guys are finishing up, in response to the question in the text box, difficulty levels are not something that will help you at all in any way. So, in fact, ironically, the fact that you have to ask that question is proof that you don't really care. You know, because you're asking the question means you have no idea what the difficulty level is. So you can't base a strategy around it. You can't base a strategy on something that you can't even tell what it is. So there's no sense in worrying about that. Every problem is a respectable opponent, as it were. Okay, let's pick something. If you don't have something yet, you should pick something. Okay. Jack, Janine, Chunying. Okay, let's take a look. This is a question about assumptions. What you can do with assumption questions, I mean, there are a couple of ways that you might just see the end assumption as you go. But the most concrete way to handle these things, which we've talked about before, it's also in the course and in the materials and stuff. Assumptions are things that have to be true. So have to meaning if they are false, then the argument falls apart. So to make assumption problems, because seeing assumptions directly is not very concrete. You kind of just have to magic them out of thin air. But what you can do concretely with assumptions is you can negate them and see if that destroys the argument. And that's the most concrete way to handle assumption questions. So it's in the book, negation method. But the advantage of it is that it takes a task that otherwise is elusive. I mean, when you try to look directly for an assumption, you have to basically read an argument and look for something that's not there, which is a little bit weird. But the negation method becomes more concrete because you actually start from an answer choice, where the answer choice is supposedly an assumption. Assumptions are necessary, so that means if you make the choice false, the argument should fall apart. So you can still personalize this. You know, you found an actual assumption if the argument is destroyed. No, okay. I mean, the front page said specifically people or businesses, but you can go beyond that if necessary. So what we're debating here is what is inhibiting fertility in female rhinoceroses. So this might seem a little bit far-fetched, but you can make yourself what? Whose perspective would you want to adopt here? Who, if they were sentient, would have the most insight on what's going on here? Who is most directly at the center of this? Yeah, the rhinoceroses are, right? Especially the female ones. So, you know, it seems a bit weird, but if you adopt the perspective of a female rhinoceros, it's probably a lot easier than it otherwise is. So, you're a female rhino today. That's kind of how it goes, right? Some days you wake up and you're just a female rhino. Okay, and so then what's going on is, like, the issue here is that female rhinoceroses that have been re-collared a lot. You're a female rhino whose collar keeps slipping off. and it has to be replaced. And your issue is, whoa, you are so much less fertile now. Your fertility has plummeted. Okay. And we're investigating exactly why that is. And what they're saying is, because every time they do this, every time they replace your collar, they have to use this tranquilizer dart. So what they're saying is if they keep having to trank you over and over and over again, that's what's doing it. It must be the tranquilizer dart. So that's what they say. So remember, that's the thing you're trying to destroy by reversing the answer choices. So they say must be something in the tranquilizer dart. So that's the standard. Standard is you take an answer choice, make it false, and you should, once you do that, the argument that it must be something in the tranquilizer should be destroyed. Should no longer be valid. There's a standard. It should work somehow against that argument. Well, it's probably going to do that. And the only way you could really, because if you're a female rhino, you're looking for answers here, right? You're like, why can I not have baby rhinos anymore? If they're going to prove, or if they're going to shoot down this argument, I mean, you're still looking for answers. So they're going to have to do it in a way where some alternate thing is blamed. The blame should be shifted from the tranquilizer to something else. So I mean, it's not good enough to just be like, oh, seems doubtful to be the tranquilizer thing. You're gonna have to pin it on something else. So let's do that. Let's negate some answer choices and see what happens. Choice A says the dose of a tranquilizer is large enough to give. So they hit you with such a large dose that there's no way that you could threaten these guys, even if you wanted to. So, if that's false, remember you're making these false. If it's false, then that means the dose isn't that big. But that doesn't really change your issue, right? Like, I mean, if the tranquilizer is the problem, it could still be the problem. Even if the dose is a little smaller, that doesn't mean that it's not going to cause fertility issues. So it doesn't really change anything. It definitely doesn't destroy the argument. It pretty much has no effect on it. B says that your friends who are not collared have been more and more and more fertile lately. So this is not really a surprise, right? Because we actually already know this. We already know that collaring seems to go hand in hand with lack of fertility. I mean, this has already been established. So choice B is really just taking what you already know and just kind of putting an exclamation point on it. But this just emphasizes a trend that's what we already know. If you make this false, what do we get if we make that false? fertility rate has been increasing in the past few decades. So we'd have to make that part false. The fertility is the same for both? Not necessarily. This is just the fertility rate of the ones who don't have the collars. If you make false, you just get hasn't been increasing. That doesn't mean it's the same as the fertility rate for you. Because the point here is that your fertility rate has actually gone down. So, you know, even if your girlfriend rhinoceroses who have not been collared, I mean, even if they are just as fertile as they always have been, and that doesn't really address your problem. Your decrease in fertility is still unaddressed. It doesn't destroy the argument because, I mean, if it said, if you actually could get from here to the rate of the same, then it would definitely destroy the argument, because if the rates were the same with or without a tranquilizer, that would show the tranquilizer is not doing anything. But it doesn't. It's just comparing your uncollared friends now to what they would have been in the past. So, yeah. Any questions about that? The uncollared females may have another reason to increase. Yeah, cowshell, that's also true. Although, remember, you want to avoid going too far down paths that are not productive. Like, you gotta have a standard, right? So, the standard is we are still trying to explain why your fertility has gone down. If you talk about them, we're already far enough afield. So what you're saying is true, although there's not really a need to consider it because it's already off topic by the time you get to this part. By the time you're talking about your friends who don't have collars, we're already off topic. So, efficiency-wise. All right, choice C. If choice C is false, what does that mean? It's false that the stress of being immobilized and handled has little or no effect. If that is false, then what is true? It means it has an effect, right? So what this means for you is that your fertility goes down by more than a negligible amount when they keep, you know, holding you down and tranquilizing you and stuff. But it's the way they handle you. Notice, no, tranquilizer. It's just the immobilization and the handling, specifically not the tranquilizer. It's the rest of the process. It's the physical stress. So, notice what this does. This is the something else. Like we're saying, yeah, this destroys the argument that it is a tranquilizer, because now it's the other factors that have to do with the collaring. It doesn't prove the conclusion false. I mean, it could be the tranquilizer and C. But the point is that if this is true, then you can no longer establish that the tranquilizer is to blame. So this argument is gone. So this is the right answer. So that destroys that when you reverse it. D, these are your male friends. It's good for them that they don't lose their collars as often, but we don't care about them. We care about you, female rhinoceros. Male rhinoceroses don't really have this issue. So, females are the population that we care about. Also, you know, even if you think about this, because I mean, you might consider D as maybe that's a control group of sorts. But the problem is, again, we already know that the more you're recollared, the lower your fertility goes. So you can notice that, you know, if they don't lose their collars, then they're not, you know, they don't lose it as often. You would expect them not to have this issue. So, like if they said, if the male rhinoceroses, even though they lose their collars less often, if they had the same decline in fertility, then you would have something there. But this is just a statement that they don't lose their collars as often. We don't know what happens to their fertility. So, not a good comparison. We see their assumption what Ramesh 9, what are you responding to exactly? Can we assume another assumption? Assume another assumption. I am kind of lost in that question. Maybe you could explain. If you're saying that we don't, I mean, the connection between those two things is explicitly made in this choice. So if you make this false, then you are explicitly given, if it's false, that there is a relationship between this stress and the fertility. It actually says that effect on the fertility of stress. So you don't need to make any additional connections that are not already there. So hopefully that helps. Cool. And then E says that they also use the tranquilizer for other big animals. Well, that's great, but that doesn't really tell you anything. This doesn't answer your question about. You're still wondering. You're still left wondering about fertility. It has nothing to do with fertility. Yeah, if you're the female rhinoceros, the main thing about making yourself the female rhinoceros is that the focus of the question is much more obvious. Yeah, because you're sitting there wondering about something that is extremely personal. Your friends are all having baby rhinos, and you can't have baby rhinos. Sad. You're wondering why this is the case. You know, you'll immediately know that things like D don't matter. Because you're wondering about you. And we don't know whether these male rhinoceroses are having babies or not. So it's not going to address your issue. Same thing with B. I mean, it doesn't really matter to you what's going on with the uncollared ones. Because you're still wondering about this issue of yours. That's why this helps. Because, I mean, a lot of the wrong answers on these problems are just things that are not relevant to the issue. And to understand exactly what the issue is, that's the most valuable thing about personalizing it. Because when something really affects you, you'll know what's relevant and what's not. You just will. Choice B and C. Okay, just real quick, B one more time. The point is that your fertility rate has gone down, and that's what we're wondering about. So this baseline rate, this baseline rate's already higher than yours. You have a lower fertility rate than they do. So whether their rate has been going up or not, it doesn't affect the issue. Like if B is true, then their fertility is going up, but it's already higher than yours anyway. If B is false, then their fertility rate has been constant. But it's still higher than yours. So, still leaves the mystery unaddressed. It doesn't affect this argument. Because regardless of whether B is true or false, the fact of the matter is that your uncollared friends are more fertile than you are. If you make B false, it doesn't change it. So, making B false really does nothing. Hopefully that helps. Any other questions, feel free. If not, we'll do something else. And don't be afraid to be a female rhinoceros when you take this test. Sounds weird, right? But yep, I was a female rhinoceros today. How many of your friends can say that? All right, let's try another one. How about that one? And of course, don't forget where your multiple choice options are found. All right, we should be picking some things. Okay. If you don't have an answer yet, let's see. Anjal, Brian West, Chen Ying, Sergey, Wendy, and GJIE. Okay. All right, so no one's got B boy or E elephant. So we're not going to spend too much time on those. Indeed, those are actually wrong answers. But the other three, there's a significant number of people picking each of the other three. But okay, so ultimately, what is the plan supposed to do? Like, what constitutes success for the plan? You figure that out even before you read what the plan involves. You can tell what defines success. So that's two things: reduce tax and get more businesses. Which one is the actual point of the plan? Which one is the objective? Well, what are we trying to do? That's what we're trying to do, right? Not the tax thing. I mean, the tax thing is one of the aspects of the plan. But the tax thing is, they just hatched that as a way to do this. This is the goal of the plan. So, and when you say people, presumably that means business people, right? So, who are you when you read this thing, considering that this is what they want? And what is your, who are you, and what is your standard for the answer choices? Yeah, you're a business owner, or at least a manager who chooses where the business goes, looking for a new place. And then what is the standard that you're going to ask the answer choices? Remember, don't look at the answer choices until you have a standard. Like, threaten the plan's likelihood of success. Wow, that's so abstract. But if you are a business owner, this is certainly not abstract anymore. What does it mean to threaten the plan's likelihood of success? Is it incentive to move ? But which way do you want to go on that? If the plan's success is threatened, which one of these makes me what? How did you fill in the rest of that question? Which one of these makes me, you're just thinking too much right now. They think that this plan is going to get me to go downtown and locate my business in the downtown area. They think that it's going to make me want to do that. So if the plan's success is threatened, that means that what do I want or not want to do? Yeah, I don't want to go downtown. Which one of these makes me not want to relocate my business to downtown? Okay. I mean, again, there shouldn't be too much brain power that goes into this. Like when you set a standard for the choices, you're not thinking of anything new yet. I mean, it's true that the answer is going to have to be something that's not mentioned yet. But remember, this is something you need to come up with before you look at the answer. So if you're thinking about things like taxes or something like that, not yet. Now you read about this. Now you read what the details are. So there's going to be a lot of modern buildings. So there's the pros of the plan. Modern buildings, so they're probably sleek and cool looking. And reduction in tax rates. Well, okay. These sound pretty good. I mean, modern buildings, you can't really argue against that, right? I mean, if they're modern, they're modern. But reduction, you're like, well, okay, that's a start. But the problem with reduction is that there's still this open issue about where is it reduced from. So this may or may not, I actually haven't seen these choices in a long time, so I don't remember what they do, but from what you should be asking. I mean, if it's reduced from a rate that's super high, maybe not, but let's see. So, all right, let's take a look. So we want something that will make us not want to relocate to downtown. Not downtown, downtown bad. Most of the businesses that are already there have long-term leases. Well, great, good for them. If I'm thinking about relocating there, this is not helpful information. Good for them, but I don't care. I mean, if there was something about incentives for a long-term lease, then I might be on board. But this is just a random fact. And it has nothing to do with incentives. So, it doesn't help me. Again, if you personalize it, it should be pretty clear that A is just not what we want. All right, B, nobody picked, but, this means there's a lot of empty space, which is great, but, as long as there's something empty, it's fine with me. So, I mean, I don't need a lot of empty space in my building. I just need one empty space. All right, let's see. Well, notice that this is the reduced tax rate. That brownish, yellowish thing. Like, that's actually the post-reduction rate. This is the rate after the reduction. So what does C mean to me? Well, this means even it was nice of them to offer this. But even with that taken into account, I'm still going to pay less tax if I go to the suburbs. So it's going to make me not want to go downtown, right? I would rather pay less tax if I can help it. That's the choice we want. Ramesh, you could probably build some sort of case for that, but you would have to make assumptions about vacancy rates and such. You know, if you assume certain things about desirability, you know, I mean, like if a lot of empty spaces makes it less desirable, then sure. But you know, I mean, the problem is that high vacancy rate also might mean lower rents or something, which would be nice. So you would have to make up stuff about that. You would just have to hypothesize the effect of the vacancy rate. You don't want to do that because you can't just make stuff up. You can use common sense, and you can use strong real-world connections, but you can't just make stuff up. So better to just say there's a dead end. I mean, vacancy rate doesn't help me because there's no obvious connection to anything. Because you want to be careful with doing that. You don't want to just make up connections. Like, this is not a made-up connection. This is, I would definitely pay less tax if I went to the suburbs. Even with the incentive that they've offered, it's not good enough to cover that. Choice D says that most businesses downtown also have space in the suburbs. Again, if I'm considering this doesn't really help me. Like, what does this mean for me? I don't know. Good for them. I don't really care. Because again, I'm a random business. You know, we don't know if I have satellite offices. We don't know if I'm expanding to downtown versus just relocating there or founding a business there. We don't know. So, but there's no connection between this and my situation. And then E, which nobody picked. E makes downtown seem like an attractive location. It makes it seem up and coming. I mean, if anything, E makes downtown seem like a better place. If anything. Just makes me want to. So that's the opposite of what we want. Wrong way. So, you know, we have four things that are just not. We have three things that are just not things. As far as I'm concerned, I want to know whether I should open my office downtown. A doesn't help me with that. B doesn't help me with that. D doesn't help me with that. This makes me want to do it. This makes me not want to do it. And again, when you finish reviewing these problems, you should actually get to that point. Because one thing that is very, very, very consistent about official critical reasoning problems is that the wrong answers are not close to being correct. They're not nitpicks. So if you don't, before you can consider yourself done with reviewing a problem, you have to get to a point where all the wrong answers are very clearly wrong for reasons that you can concisely state. But this should never be only a little bit wrong, and it should never require subtleties or nitpicks. They should be very, very, very wrong. Like A and B and D here are things that I just don't care about. Or at least whose connection to my situation is not obvious. E makes it look like an attractive destination. And then C is like, nope, more text downtown bad. Still wouldn't, the term of the lease still doesn't tell me anything. I mean, if I knew that most places had long or short-term leases, then it doesn't matter, right? I mean, you know, imagine you're going to move into an apartment complex. You know, all you really care about is whether there are apartments available and, you know, where is this apartment complex. And if someone tells you, you know, if you're looking for a 6-month lease or something, and someone is like, well, most people who live here have 12-month leases, you wouldn't care. As long as you can get your 6-month lease, fine. Because there's nothing here about requirements. This is just most of them have that. Well, good for them. doesn't affect your situation. And you would have to make up a lot of stuff to connect this to your situation. You would have to invent a lot of things, a lot of connections that aren't really there. Because as it stands, this is a dead end. Where are you going to go from here? So no. Okay, we got a couple of people typing things. Let's see what's being typed before we go to another one. I'm typing. No, it's just George. George is typing. Let's see what George is typing. At what point do you decide whether it is a factor? Well, you can keep in mind. Although, what you want to think about, because, again, they're going to go after this plan, right? They're going to give you something that makes the plan not seem good. So, if you think about this, you kind of want to just go at it. I mean, you can keep both of them in mind, I mean, theoretically. But if you think about it, you know, which one of these is more likely to have weaknesses in it? Well, I mean, if a building is modern, it's modern. You know, like the only way that could be a weakness is if you, like, specifically want a building that is not modern. Which, you know, maybe. I mean, you could have an answer choice that's like, you know, we're like a quirky interior design business that wants a really old looking space. Okay, well in that case, modern buildings is bad. Because, you know, you have to lease in one of the new ones, right? But otherwise, this is clearly a plus by default, and there's not really a lot of obvious ways to go against it. On the other hand, a reduction, you know, you get a lot of ways that could be not really great. I mean, if you're reducing it from a rate that is already high, then, you know, right? Or something like C, where even with a reduction, it's still more expensive than other places, right? I mean, you know, because apartment complexes do this all the time. They post some phony, like, I mean, it's not a tax rate, but it's analogous. Like, you post some phony full price, and they're like, oh, you know, we'll give you 10% off. When in reality, it's just an inflated number, right? I mean, this reduction could be a reduction from any value at all, because it doesn't say low tax rates. It just has reduced tax rates. And according to Choice C, they're still high. But I mean, we're paying more attention to this because it's more clear that this could be a liability. This can only be a liability if I am a quirky business that would consider modern a negative, which is unlikely. I mean, you can look for that. It's not there. But, you know, just think about it with the real world perspective, and you know, this one's got more holes in it. Okay, let's look at another problem. There you go. Yeah. All right. Super restaurant chain. Okay, we're starting to get into the neighborhood of taking a long time. If you're still headed towards a definite goal that is definite, then, which is by this point seems unlikely. So Chengding Jack JIE. All right. Well, as always, this centers on making things like this and this into real things. I mean, again, you know, imagine conversations if you don't understand the degree of specific that you're looking for. I mean, if anyone was talking about what will the proposal do to achieve the goal, I mean, that's not how people converse about issues or debate. To have a debate, the very first thing you would have to do is get all those kinds of green words out. Argument, proposal, goal, reason, undermine. You don't want any of those. You want specific. You want to understand what are the sides of the issue and then just which side are we on. So the goal, what is the goal? Well, they actually say goal. So we want more sales. So for restaurant, that means more total customers. So we want more customers. Because sales growth, you're not really going to, unless we actually mention, like we're going to raise the price point or add more expensive things to the menu. They don't mention anything about prices themselves going up, so therefore this can only mean new customers. And those new customers cannot come at the cost of old customers. Like if we lose old customers to get them, that's not good either. So new customers without losing existing ones. Okay, well. And then ineffective. So they're saying the proposal, let's color code this. The proposal is to open more new restaurants. That seems reasonable enough. Because, the deal is past performance, right? Like by opening new restaurants before, we keep getting new regulars. We keep getting new customers. So we just keep doing that. That's what they're thinking. So standard. What do you want to show? So see if someone here can state the standard without using any vague terminology. Question that you think of it as asking a question to the answer choices. What are you asking the answer choices? What you guys come up with there. Yeah, and then it's more than just that question, Brian. That's the issue. And make sure you know which side of that issue you're supposed to come down on. So the issue is, will opening even more new? Like, will we get more customers if we open even more locations? So what makes the company not open new restaurants? That's not the issue. I mean, we know that the proposal is the proposal. So what we don't need to think about is what happens if we don't implement the proposal at all. Just if that's not clear, just make an analogy to any other such thing. Like if someone tells you about this weird diet they're going to go on, well, which argues that the diet would be an ineffective way of losing weight, right? You're only thinking about the diet. You don't have to consider, like, what if they do something else, other diet. You don't do that. So when we say adopting the proposal would be ineffective, the proposal is a given. Like, we're only talking about the consequences of if we do this. We don't need to think about not doing that. Because that's not the issue. The issue is not, will we actually do this or not? It's, if we do it, what will happen? So yeah, the ineffective option would be, so if the plan is effective, that would mean we get more customers. So ineffective is we don't. So that's the side we want to follow on here. So the standard that you want to apply to the answer choices standard against which you hold the choices up is going to be which of these makes me think that I won't get new customers even if I open up new locations. So to compress that a little bit more, new locations, but not new customers. That's what I want. Let's think about that. Well, times when they find our restaurants too crowded. What does that make me think that we should probably do if this is a problem? There's a problem with overcrowding of anything. What would you like to do? You would like to open more. This gives us a very good reason to open more locations. So this doesn't really, not only, there's two problems here. The first problem is that it doesn't speak to the results of the plan, which is really all we care about. So that's a big problem. It doesn't really give us any better speculation about what will happen. But what if it does anything? It just makes expansion seem more important or more urgent than it does now. So I mean, in effect, it's mostly irrelevant because it doesn't really speak to results. But if anything, it goes the wrong way. I mean, it makes it seem like we should. If crowding is a major problem, then we would probably have more space for those customers if we open new places. B says, has generally opened well, okay, but that doesn't really say that we're going to keep doing that. So the first thing here is that we don't know that the new locations will do the same. Like there's nobody saying we'll keep doing this. So this is not directly relevant to the plan at all. But also, you know, our whole deal, like even if we do keep doing this, our whole business model is to steal customers from other restaurants. So the more restaurants there are around, the better it is for us. So like, I mean, given our strategy, doing this would be a good thing if we do. So two major problems there. The first is, you know, the past behavior is no guarantee of the future. Second thing is that given our historical trend of stealing patrons from other restaurants, actually this is exactly what we would want to do. C, nobody picked because I think you know that this just doesn't matter. I mean, if I am the owner of Super and I am looking to expand, I mean, man, if people like my small menu, they like my small menu. You would have to make up any connection to this. No connection to the issue here at all. You know, for smaller variety of foods, well, I mean, great. Right now I'm doing business with a small variety of foods and it's working. So I can keep doing that. What is choice D? Choice D in simpler language means potential sites. Or, I mean, anywhere I'm thinking of opening. Anywhere I'm thinking of opening a restaurant, I already have a restaurant in the neighborhood. So, I mean, just think about this. Think about pizza joints. Think about fast food places. Think about whatever. I mean, if you open a Starbucks a block away from another Starbucks, Is that, you think it's really going to have an overall effect on customers? Probably not, right? I mean, what it'll probably do is just redistribute existing customers. You know, it would probably lighten the load on each individual restaurant. You know, like if I open a Starbucks right next to a Starbucks, then the customers will probably split 50-50 or whatever. But it's not terribly reasonable to think that new people will materialize out of nowhere if they already have my restaurant in their neighborhood. But there are more customers, but they're going to be the same customers, right? The same. Like, again, think about opening a Starbucks next to a Starbucks. People who come to the new one are going to be the same people who would have just gone to the old one. Yeah, so it's only going to, like, you would have to invent reasons for this to not be the right answer. Like this, because by default, this means that I'm just going to be getting the customers who already have my restaurant as an option. So no new, I'm not going to get new customers because I'm just going to get customers who would have gone to the nearby location instead. So, I mean, to make this not imply that, you would have to make stuff up. Like, I mean, if there were overflow problems, then maybe, but you can't just assume that there are. You know, like if this is true, but all of the existing ones have to turn away customers because the lines are so long, then sure. And then also, you know, I mean, either that or something else, like if the new ones would be like swanky and cool, and they would attract the cool kids who didn't want to go to the old one. But by default, just think of what your first association is if you think about opening a Starbucks right next to another Starbucks. You don't think a bunch of new people are going to come. I mean, you think that they'll just take away half the customers of the original, is what you think. So unless you make up stuff that is made up. Yeah, I mean, just analogies are your friend, right? If you don't see the connection here, just think about Starbucks next to a Starbucks, or a gym a block away from another gym that you own. You're probably not going to get anybody new. You'll just get half the people who went to the other gym. So you're just going to redistribute your existing customers. We have built our business by offering meals that are less expensive. This is great. That means we have, you know, lower price business model. But that doesn't speak to whether this plan will do anything. It certainly doesn't show that it won't. So there's no information about whether new customer base will happen here. So what is not realistic? What do you mean not realistic? I think we have other questions also. Feel free. Okay. Let's try to make this quick here because we're over time by. What I do not understand. Okay, that is a joke that I don't get. All right, that's it. In any case, we are over time, so thank you for attending. And the next one's not for a little bit. It is, I want to say, December the 9th. So I think it's 3 weeks from today. So 3 weeks, something like that. Maybe it's not the 9th. 9th. Whatever date is around there somewhere. Let me get the exact date here. It should be Thursday. I believe the next session is Thursday, the 11th of December. And that's the only additional session that we're going to do between now and the holiday. Mike Bubuga. I'm going to Google that because I don't know who that is. But I'm going to, let's see. I'm assuming it's not a good thing, man, because my voice is not a good thing. Voice made being pictures, as it were. But kill the recording.